I'm resident of Colorwood for YouTube, Joel Sains, joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski and my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to talk episode 443 of Dark Shadows, narrated by the lovely Grayson Hall, written by her husband Sam Hall, and directed by John Sedwick. So this is a 1795 episode, really, really good. A lot of good built. Gordon, is that why you picked this episode?
Well, kind of.
Okay.
There's a bit of an explanation. This episode was transmitted on March 6, 1968. 2 days later, on NBC, was the episode of Star Trek called The Ultimate Computer. In England, this episode came between episodes 5 and 6 of A Web of Fear of Doctor Who. I'm just bringing that up to kill time because the real reason is March 6, 1968 is the day I was born.
Cool.
So I'm probably the only person here who actually lived through part of the tail end of the regional run of Dark Shadows. And, you've seen Joel do the whole, episode 461 isn't a soft reboot. And I was like, listen, I was there, okay? I get that cred.
It was Tempur-Pedic soft.
Yes. Maybe other people ran home from school. I pooped in my pants for Doctor Who.
You ran home from the womb.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this with this episode. You got Greg Slocum in this episode. You have Joel Carruthers. You have Millicent, Nancy Barrett's in this episode. You have Grayson Hall, who's in this episode. And I really like the fact that they're keeping going the Collinsport Strangler, and I love how Greg Slocum's character's fear is building the Collin. He's scared of the Collinsport Strangler. It's not just the fact that they dumped the body. Yeah, it's that too. But he's like, okay, I want out of town. I want out of here. Just give me my 50 so I can go. And I actually like Greg Slocum's character in this episode. What did you guys think?
I want to pass that one to Gordon while I look something up.
Let's see. Can I call my lawyer just to avoid a charge of defamation? No, I think that in the initial scene between Carruthers and Slocum, you can tell Joel Carruthers is having a ball playing this. There's he is playing evil, but he's playing it. There's a sense of fun about it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm no longer Joe Haskell. I'm Nathan Forbes. Slocum kind of comes off a little bit. I think he's trying a little too hard to do the scared thing. It doesn't quite work for me. But I think it's just more of a my eyes are focused on Carruthers rather than Slocum. You know what I mean? He's being evil without being evil.
Yeah. I think with this episode too, like, I don't think he's trying too hard. I think they need somebody to emphasize not that only that they dumped the body for Reverend Trask, that they want to put some fear in the Collinsport Strangler. So instead of writing another death scene for Barnabas to strangle another woman, you have Craig Slocum build the fear by going, I want to get out of town. And I think that's a good way to do it. I mean, why not have a man be afraid? Hey, what if I'm attacked? Anybody could really be a victim of this thing. You never know. It's a random. When a random killer's roaming the streets, your first thought is, okay, I need to stay the hell off the streets. Sort of like Jack the Ripper-esque, if you will. Again, there's no stabbing involved in this, mind you. But I love the interaction between him and Joel Carruthers. Joel's got his feet propped up. He's cooler than the other side of the pillow in here. Good, Pat.
What's fascinating to me about this episode is that I've been working very hard getting a show going, and for some reason I misread either Amazon or your message, which was accurate, Jewel. And I watched 463. So I went 20 episodes ahead. And it's a hell of an episode, let me tell you. It's the one where Angelique's portrait shows up.
Yeah, great episode.
That's the one I watched. So.
Yep. Joel probably missent the episode.
No, he didn't. I checked it. So yeah, it's that's why when you said 1795, I just thought. Oh.
Don't worry, we'll fill you in.
In this episode, to sort of give you a fill in for it, again, Maud Browning has been got murdered by Barnabas. The dead prostitute's body was left on Reverend Trask's bed. In this episode,
how did he get her here as a bat?
Hold on, but in this episode, it starts off with Slocum and Forbes talking about her body shows up. Her body has washed up. The
comedy stylings of Slocum and Forbes.
Yeah, he's like, that's another reason why he's wanting to get out of town. And Forbes is just like, so what? It washed up. And I think the thought of the Collinsport Strangler is scaring Slocum's character. Again, random killer. You don't want to be the next victim. I want out of town. It's a common occurrence in horror. And I love that aspect of it because it builds the fear, even though Barnabas isn't strangling anybody in this episode, though they're going to frame him for strangling somebody in this episode, which is fitting. You see Forbes with Barnabas's cane, which cool, how he got it. And in this episode, Millicent receives a letter from Barnabas, but it's actually written by Nathan Forbes, and it's Greg Slocum's character who delivers said letter. I doubt very much Barnabas would just put the initial B on a letter. Good job, Millicent.
Well, actually, it's a fan.
Yeah,
it's a fan that
fan. And also in this episode, there's a actress who's uncredited as the maid in this episode. You do see her in this episode. And Grayson Hall's in this episode, and
Grayson Hall wrestles a bear on camera.
God, yes. God bless you, Sam.
And the bear taps out. Also,
Exeunt bear pursued by Grayson Hall. Shakespeare's greatest stage direction.
You also get the mention of Josette's death in this episode, which it's like, damn. But by the end of this episode, what the plot is, they're going to Forbes wants to get back into Collins' good graces. So his plot is to have Greg Slocum's character creep up on Millicent from behind and try to strangle her with Barnabas's cane. They're going to drop, obviously they're going to make sure Millicent sees the cane. That's the point of them using it. And Nathan Forbes is going to come to her rescue. Now, what this episode doesn't show by the end is Nathan Forbes coming to the rescue. That's going to be in the next episode. So that's sort of that is, in a sense, this episode, which is a really good episode.
It is. I've seen it, just not recently.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of this episode,
Craig's
Gordon?
Sorry. I thought it did a lot of. I think one of the things I enjoyed this episode. I think one of the things it does well, because this is the first time that people aren't playing their usual characters.
Yeah.
There's a sense of discovery and a sense of fun about it. That it's not just, we get to put on costumes and play the same people. I mean, Grayson Hall plays the Countess Dupre. Craig Slocum plays a sailor that we really don't care about. Joel Carruthers has real fun. You can see it in his eyes playing Nathan Forbes because he's evil, but he never overplays it. I think what's interesting is with Nancy Barrett playing Millicent, you can see where she's good at playing that kind of slippery edge of sanity in her performance, where she's talking about how she doesn't like fans, even though Barnabas wrote this note on a fan that used to be Josette's, or how like she's insisting on taking the she thinks Barnabas is going to come. Yeah. And at this point, she talks to the Countess Dupre about Barnabas is in London. No, and Grayson also told her, no, he's dead. He's deader than my love for Sam. And there's that little reality check, but Millicent is taking a set of dueling pistols, because I think at one point she says, well, yeah, Barnabas will take care of me, but they'll handle the masculine aspects of the duel, whatever those are. Yeah. I also think too,
being penetrated.
Right. I think they're obviously setting up the obvious Barnabas Nathan Forbes showdown, but I think one of the great things about this episode is it's Dark Shadows realizing that they can still do like the character moments that they were able to do in their first year, where every character gets a little spotlight, but it's always in service of the plot moving. I mean, we start with Nathan and Craig Slocum's goofy ass sailor. We end with the goofy ass sailor trying to strangle Millicent with Nathan Forbes in the corner. And I think this is where Dark Shadows is kind of realizing, like, okay, yeah, we can do a different type of story than vampire. You know what I mean? It's moving. It's starting to, at least for me, it's starting to move away from pure soap opera, but it's also not it's still kind of in that, okay, well, we can do this and we can do this kind of mode.
Patrick, what do you think, man?
I concur. I agree.
I think with this episode too, like Millicent, Nancy Barrett is Millicent, where she's half crazed, like she's somewhat out of her mind to a degree. Like she thinks, again, the whole family hasn't been told about Barnabas dying. I get that. That's all cool, but she thinks Barnabas is going to defend her honor. She receives this note. Like you said, she's got to grab the dueling pistols. It's like, and then she's going out to the garden, and her waiting there. She's just like, and creeping up behind her. Is Greg Slocum's character. He's all dressed up like some sort of half-ass serial killer, and it's not the best look. And he takes the cane and
something.
Yeah, he had a mask on.
Yeah, he kind of looks like a bad Batman cosplayer.
Yeah.
In other words, like a Batman cosplay.
Yeah.
And they make sure that Millicent sees the cane. That's the most important thing with this. That he has the cane like this pressed up against her almost, and like there's the struggle. Nathan's gonna come to the rescue, and then literally the next episode, again, really well written episode. I love how the
Happy Days.
I love how the maid's just cleaning in this episode. She's just like, Mrs. Johnson would be proud of her. True. Who's you guys' favorite Dark Shadows director?
See, I don't with soap operas
Right.
and this kind of television. There's really no room, not a lot of room for, like, as Patrick would say, for auteurs. The auteurs in the writing. It's not like, say, Doctor Who back in the classic era, where because the BBC ran, they kind of had basically their own training ground, and directors worked on different shows. You don't have the sense of, like, well, if you want something military, you go to Douglas Camfield. If you want something character based, you go to Patty Russell or Christopher Berry. If you want something technical, you go to Michael Lee Bryant. If you want something like really strange, you go to, and they'll overrun the budget, you go to Michael Ferguson. You don't have that in Dark Shadows. So for me, it's asking me who my favorite director is like asking who my favorite, second lighting unit director is. I don't really, it's not really visible. I mean, Patrick could probably speak more to this than I could, but I'm not saying they're all bad. It's just, it's not something you can really see.
Yeah.
The only Dark Shadow. I'm sorry, Gordon. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go right ahead.
Right. The only Dark Shadows director really stands out to me, and I don't know if he would stand out if the name were taken off the episode and I weren't telling. Is Dan Curtis, who does seem flashier. I mean, it's good to be the king. Yeah, he can take a little more time setting up the lighting and all of that stuff because he's got the 9-iron. So Leela Swift, I like a lot. In the episode that we saw yesterday that we talked about, there's some really good stuff with, Jeff Clark and then the scalpel coming into focus and little things like that are fun. The reason I think I probably like Leela Swift more has to do with hearing about life backstage. And Henry Kaplan sounds like he was kind of mean. Unnecessarily. With running around grading people and all that. What is that? So I have to lean a little bit more towards Leela on that, just based on her reputation. But again, as we talked about in TV, you don't. The relationship with the director and actors is almost non-existent. Because they're busy with the lighting and with the cameraman, especially with so little time. So you don't get that. And that's a truth that was laid on me by a Dark Shadows cast member, an obscure one, but my pal Alan Feinstein, who is in that first or second episode where Carolyn's the blue whale. He's in the striped shirt. And so I was his assistant for a while, and he really laid out the truth of TV on that. And they're busy people. And on Dark Shadows, as with the writers, although it's a little more evident with it, you have sort of different writers going on in Dark Shadows. You really don't want either your writers or your directors to stand out too much, because you want a uniformity of experience for the audience members. And so the director overall is kind of Dan Curtis, creating the feel and sound of the show, or at least overseeing the feel and sound of the show. That's why, most TV directors are most of that's pretty generic. I mean, even if you look at God forgive me, a genuinely great show like The Sopranos or something, even then the directors don't stand out a lot, and they're not supposed to.
Right.
The show is supposed to stand out, and they're kind of hired to fit into that.
Yeah, and I think for directing on Dark Shadows, the focus would be less on visual style and more on performance. So I could see someone going through and, okay, Leela Swift does this with the performers. Henry Kaplan does this. That's where I think you could probably see the style, like the actual direction style. It's not going to be invisible, because remember, you're dealing with 3 big, relatively static cameras. And you've got to make sure that Pearson hits their mark, says their line. You have to make sure they remember their line. And so there really wasn't. I think the style would be more in the types of stories that they did, and even that for Dark Shadows is a stretch because there's so much story. But I don't think any of the directors were necessarily visual stylists, but I think their emphasis might be more on what can I do with the actors to get the best performance.
Well, yeah, and I don't think, it's not like they were picking out opportunities where, oh, this one really needs that Henry Kaplan feel. It's like, okay, whose day off is it Leela's day off? Okay, Henry, you're up. Yeah, and I think it's based on probably a rotation of that.
I think the directors and writers just really did a great job.
Definitely.
You know what I mean? Like, I love the way they shoot this episode. Like, how Nathan Forbes, Joel Carruthers has his feet up, and the way they shoot it, and the way they're shooting his reaction, just how confident he is, and it's really a cool visual moment. Right. They're just good visual moments in Dark Shadows that are like, and that's one of them. And there's many. I mean, I'm not just meaning the effects stuff. That's cool. But they're just cool visual shots of characters. It's like, man, the directors and the camera operators really knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think
when they could.
Yeah, as I was saying, I think it may have been, to Patrick's point, even if it's a rotation, it's like they look at the script and go, oh, I can do this. That's probably where the whole style thing is, but I don't think it's necessarily I'm going to have this vision and I'm only going to do scripts with themes of this. But, in that format, you can do a lot with 3 cameras. But I don't think, I'm sure that if Dark Shadows had been on 35 millimeter film, oh boy, that would have gotten, you'd have really good looking episodes and really crappy looking ones. But so I think that's where the whole director auteur thing would fit. It's more about opportunities, happy accidents, and just serving the script and the performers.
Yeah, it's this is very industrial storytelling. It's very assembly line in a lot of those ways. These don't have the time for trial and error. They don't have the time to take risks. So when they can, I think they are all firsts among equals at being able to sneak in a fun moment. But in terms of sort of flash and style, few and far between. However, the fact that they're all watchable and that they move well and that they happen at all, my God, these people had to block this thing, and blocking's not easy. When they had to block it, they had to give some notes to the actors and then arrange this, nonstop 20-minute 3-ring circus of getting people to hit their marks and be in the right place at the right time and zip back and forth. That's a huge job. And so, those moments like the feet up or something like that, it could be the writer, could be the actor, could be the director. They were all headed in that one direction.
Yeah. What's you guys' favorite scene from this episode?
I like the one with Barnabas. I don't know. It's been years since I've seen it.
Actually, Patrick, I think you would like the whole Grayson fighting the bear moment. It's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece. I say they will cheer every word, every letter. Yeah.
Yeah, that moment where she gives the bear the stone cold stunner and it is down in its face and taunting it and calling it a son of a bitch. That moment. But anyway.
I would say my favorite scene in this episode is that is the conversation that the Countess de Prey has with Millicent, because it's not only about how fragile Millicent is. The Countess is gently reminding her that things are not what as they appear, and especially since the Countess de Prey early on just seemed to be a total bitch on wheels. Excuse my language, but I think there's a softening of the character. But I think it also reveals how the whole immediate post Barnabas Collins family is still just trying to recover from, is still trying to get a grasp of what's going on. And I think that's kind of you don't see that in a lot of soap operas at the time. What you see a lot of is, oh, I've had a trauma, but yay, I'm cured.
Yeah, the characters, this episode is set up by a lot of things. And the one thing that has constantly been going on, not just in Dark Shadows, but in 1795 is death. Josette's death, Sarah's death, Barnabas dying. We know Barnabas becomes a vampire, but Barnabas does die. I mean, and then it's before Josette's death, obviously, but then Josette dies. So you have characters who are, in many ways, in mourning. Mourning the loves, mourning the ones they lost, and you could sort of, I don't know if it's on purpose, but when you watch sort of Grayson interact with Millicent in this episode too, it comes across like her character is very like, okay, you're right, you do need to be mindful of things, but she also comes across to me like she's so numb to things because she lost Josette. Mm-hmm. Josette's death was prophesized as well, and the fact that it came true, and all the other deaths too. I mean, again, Sarah, Barnabas dying. There are very adult moments again in this arc as well that the characters have to react to, and sometimes the best way to react to them is by having less characters on screen, because it gives the believability that they're off mourning the loss.
Mm-hmm.
So. Is there anything you guys want to add for episode 443?
Marvelous.
I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of I'll call them memories, even though I don't have much memories of Dark Shadows, because one, again, it'll kill time, and two, I like hearing the sound of my own voice, but
I like the sound of your voice too.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I do not remember ever as a kid sitting down and watching Dark Shadows. Yeah. Even after, because it was actually first run in Chicago on a UHF station, which Joel, think of it, the short form is, think of it as a really, really, really crappy high number channel on digital TV. But anyway, but when I started, and I knew about it mostly as that show with the reluctant vampire. So when I actually started watching it in college, there are a lot of things that just were familiar to me. So like, for some reason, the sets looked familiar. The actual introduction with the ships, with the waves looked familiar. Booze, kids, drink early, drink often. Anyway, and like there's some familiarity, like Louis Evans would come out and I'd say, oh wait, that's Langley from All My Children. But there was a lot that was familiar to me, and I don't know to this day if it was a case of where like I caught an honest episode, or if it was just like, oh, okay, I saw a picture and it stuck there. But I think it also really amazes me to watch television that's made before or during when I was born, because it's a different visual language, it's a different mentality. And I think it's also, you see where producers and actors and directors are like, how do we do this on a budget? Because when you think about Dark Shadows, they had a budget of $70,000 per week. And from that, you had to have 5 episodes with director, writer, cast, crew. And in that, every episode you had up to 5 players, 3 standing set, 2 standing sets, and maybe a third extra set. Actors come in the morning, possibly hungover. They had to study their lines the night before. They have to do a read through at like 8 o'clock. They have to get their notes and kind of get prepped. Then there's blocking, making sure that, okay, people are pointing the right way on camera. There are adjustments. Then literally like 3 o'clock, it's okay, go time. They do the entire episode live. No cuts, no edits, no anything. I mean, Patrick called it industrial, but it's easy to forget that a lot of work went into this, that this isn't just like,
Yeah.
And when you consider that there's no really awful episode of Dark Shadows. At least there's no awful episode of Dark Shadows after episode 210, in my opinion, but that's another debate. The fact that they've been consistent, it's easy to forget that, because we just have everything in front of us. I mean, I was watching, there's an interview with one of the actors, and I forget who, where they said they didn't even eat lunch, go out to lunch. Like, they ate lunch as part of their day. So remember that, kids. The art you enjoy, there's a lot of work that goes into it.
It's true.
Yeah. Really, really good stuff, guys. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Wednesday. What are you guys doing Sunday night?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Not when we do these shows. Yeah, I'll be free.
I have an excellent episode suggestion, guys.
If it's below 210, I'm out.
Foolish laughter and grin.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Wake me up when you have the episode name.
Oh my God. Episode 72. I'll see you guys Sunday night. Yeah.
Got us. He got us, Gordon.
Yeah.
He got us.
No. So you guys have a good night, and I'll see you guys Sunday night. Take care.
Right. We'll be ready.
Good night.
We'll get you for